From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay.
So this is actually made from sea waste.
Making fashion sustainable beyond the catwalk. Here are the unusual elements some designers are now incorporating in the clothes of the future. And two big stories we're following.
They cut the imports by 15 million bushels, raised exports by 25 million bushels.
What USDA changed and didn't change in the new supply and demand report and what it means looking ahead. And a big announcement on the new US-Mexico-Canada agreement.
This is a day we've all been working to.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado and the all-new Silverado HD, the strongest, most advanced family of Silverados ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We have lots to get to this morning, including a new onesie report. But we begin with this, finally, agreement on the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, Mexico's president, and Canada's deputy prime minister signing changes to the agreement in Mexico. It comes after U.S. lawmakers reached their own agreement with the Trump administration to make some changes to the original deal signed over a year ago.
This is a day we've all been working to and working for on the path to yes. We were in range for a while, but until we could cross a certain threshold of enforcement for our workers' rights, for environment, and for the prescription drug issue, as you know, they were three of the areas that we had put out there.
The announcement coming on the same day, Democrats also announced their impeachment charges against President Trump. Just before Pelosi announced her support, President Trump tweeting out, quote, "America's great USMCA trade bill is looking good. It will be the best and most important trade deal ever made by the USA. Good for everybody, farmers, manufacturers, energy unions, tremendous support. Importantly, we will finally end our country's worst trade deal, NAFTA," end quote. The House is planning to vote on the agreement next week. National Corn Growers Association President Kevin Ross releasing the following statement, quote, "NCGA's top legislative priority in 2019 has been passing USMCA. Today's announcement brings us one step closer to ratifying this important agreement and securing the future of our trading relationship with Mexico and Canada, the top export market for U.S. corn farmers. It's been a brutal year for many farmers who really need the certainty this would provide for agricultural trade," end quote. And from the National Milk Producers Federation, President Jim Mulhern saying, quote, "USMCA will expand trade opportunities with our most valuable partners and secure immediate benefits for our rural communities, adding an estimated $548 million to dairy farm revenues in its first 6 years after implementation. Newly announced improvements to USMCA will also ensure that if our trading partners flout their dairy obligations under the trade deal, the U.S. has the tools it needs to vigorously enforce our rights. An already good deal for U.S. dairy farmers is even better now, thanks to these changes," end quote. And we've also been poring over new numbers from USDA after the release of new crop production numbers. Starting with U.S. ending stocks, and no big changes for corn and soybeans, but domestic wheat stocks came in lower, falling to 974 million bushels. That's down from just over 1 billion in November.
And they cut the imports by 15 million bushels, raised exports by 25 million bushels. So we got a 40 million bushel cut in the carryover projection on wheat. I think that's pretty good news for a market that was expecting very little change on the supply and demand tables at all.
Checking world stocks, there were hardly any changes made to the numbers for Brazil and Argentina when it comes to corn and soybeans. But overall, world ending stocks for wheat, corn, and soybeans were all higher. Taking a closer look at those numbers, corn coming in at 300 million metric tons, 5 million higher than November. Soybeans also higher by 1 million metric tons. And wheat, again, also higher.
We see world corn increase again on Chinese corn production. That they're reporting as an increase. If you look at the world minus China, it does come down a little bit, which is good news. But then you figure China in, and you've got a negative there in terms of just growing world stocks of corn. So I think we're going to continue to see in the next couple of months just kind of this environment where we're not going to see a lot of changes until we start getting a better idea of what South American production is going to look like maybe in February.
On domestic production, USDA leaving yields, harvested acres, and total production alone for corn, soybeans, and wheat.
Maybe the expectation for some people was that finally we'll see a production number lowered or lower yield or lower harvested acres. That did not come in this report. Maybe it comes in January. That late January report seems to be the time frame in which some people believe that that's possible. That's not a guarantee, but that's something that a lot of people have discussed. But USDA left the supply and demand stuff for the United States totally unchanged for the row crops.
Cotton, however, did see big changes in this report. USDA reducing production by 3% to 20.2 million 480-pound bales. The drop driven by falling yields and a slow harvest in states like Texas. Speaking of harvest, it is slowly nearing completion nationally. The last crop progress report from USDA of the year showing 92% of corn has now been harvested. North Dakota continues to struggle at only 43%. Wisconsin and Michigan are both roughly 3/4 complete. Soybean harvest, it's now considered done. Meanwhile, as I said, it's an extremely late harvest season for cotton. Just 82% of the cotton in both Texas and Kansas has been picked. 18% is still in the field. And there are reports those new tariffs against China, scheduled to kick in on Sunday, will be delayed. The Wall Street Journal reporting officials in Washington and China have signaled December 15th is not the final date for reaching a Phase 1 deal and that there's no hard deadline. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross telling Fox Business Network it's more important to get a good deal for the U.S., going on to say the Phase 1 deal with China will be largely about agriculture and trade. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue talking with reporters during a visit to Indiana.
I don't think the president wants to implement these new tariffs, but there's got to be some movement on their part to encourage him not to do that. Hopefully the signal they sent over soy and pork reduction might be that signal in that way.
White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow has said trade talks are happening almost around the clock. And the Chinese economy is continuing to struggle. Total exports last month dropped 1.1% from a year ago, and to the U.S., they were down 23%. That was the worst result for exports to the U.S. since February and the 12th straight monthly decline. As trade talks with China continue, many producers are wondering if a third round of trade aid is on the way. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer saying USDA won't make a final decision until next month. But he says most experts believe even if the Trump administration were to reach a Phase 1 trade deal with China, that wouldn't necessarily stop USDA from releasing the money. Now it's the Northeast turn to be visited by snow. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen has more.
Yeah, Clinton, we'll be seeing yet more of the white stuff in the northeastern quarter of the country. Let's take a look at our map because we're going to be seeing over the past 24 hours, it's mainly been lake effect. But as we head through the day today, we're going to be seeing yet more lake effect. But notice how a system is going to be moving across the north central United States. So we're going to see that snow increasing in parts of Wisconsin, but especially into northern lower Michigan and into the UP of Michigan, where you have that not only the system, but combined with that lake effect. Boy, those amounts are really going to be adding up. And just in time for breakfast, a look at hazelnuts growing in Bellevue, Oregon. AgDay's Betsy Jippen says these trees are on their 4th year or so, which means their first true harvest for hazelnuts will be next year. Well worth the wait, I'm sure. I'll have a lot more in your forecast coming up. Clinton?
We're going to have much more in the latest WASI report and what the numbers could mean looking ahead to 2020. And later, good fashion sense does not always make good sense for the environment. The interesting changes some in the industry are making coming up.
Machinery Pete's having a year-end unreserved online dealer auction in conjunction with Big Iron. Items are open for bidding now and close December 27th. Start bidding now at machinerypete.com/auction.
The market not too excited about new numbers from USDA and apparently wasn't moved much by the agreement reached on USMCA. Here's a look at what we'll be watching this morning from the CME.
The livestock are fairly quiet today. And the cattle markets are fairly quiet today. We've traded both sides of unchanged. Feeder cattle holding on to some strength. Feeder cattle bids cash bids have been really very strong, so that's part of the reason why we're doing that, despite the fact that corn advanced a little bit today. That's usually a negative factor on the feeder cattle market. As far as the hogs are concerned, trade talk, once again, looks like we're going to get USMCA done, so that's positive news. We do a lot of pork business with Mexico. We sell them a lot of pork. But also trade talk with China about the possibility of moving the December 15th or the next scheduled round of tariffs on December 15th, moving that back because talks are going well. So we're taking that as a positive. However, it bothers me a little bit because I really liked that December 15th time frame. to try to get something done before the holidays. If we push it further back, then I don't know if we get anything done until next year. So I'm taking that with a little bit of a mixed feelings there. As far as that USDA report is concerned, we really don't have much in the way of expectations for any of the December WASDE reports that we get from the USDA, because generally speaking, there are very little changes, if any at all. We know that the USDA is not going to change anything on the supply side of things, because that's all coming in January. And what they can do is some small changes on the demand side of the equation.
As 2019 comes to a close, there are plenty of unanswered questions, including how much corn is officially sitting out in the field unharvested. AgriTalk's Chip Flory weighing in on that and what to watch.
You know, the corn that's in the field right now, Clinton, is going to show up as DS1 on-farm corn stocks,
right,
and on-farm bean stocks when we get to the January annual production summary quarterly grain stocks report. So it's we're not done trying to figure out exactly what this 2019 crop is going to do to our supply and demand going forward. We've got a lot of questions that still need to be answered.
Well, and some of those questions are kind of surrounding trade, and this week, kind of a big week for trade. We've got some positive momentum here on the USMCA deal. Maybe that gets done before the end of the year. And then we're talking about China, and that deadline is the end of this week. How does that factor into what's swirling through these markets?
Well, it definitely has an impact as we try to figure out exactly what's going to happen going forward. I think most importantly in this is that it looks now like we are going to get past December 15 without adding any additional tariffs on Chinese products coming into the U.S. or on U.S. products going into China. That's good news, but it's not a tariff rollback. Right. We are still looking at Chinese exemptions on tariffs on U.S. soybeans and on U.S. pork, but the exact quantity we don't have a good idea on at this point.
Hey, Chip, as we look at the rest of December and getting to that big report in January that we wait for every year, kind of our year-end wrap-up, what do you expect over the next few weeks, 4 weeks, as we start 2020 here?
Volume's been pretty low in these grain markets. I don't think that that's going to change. The funds have been moving to the short side of the markets. That might change as we get into the end of the year. It just depends on what they've got for profits. So I'd expect that we will continue to see some choppy price action, some low volume trade, and low volume trade is going to make the markets vulnerable to what can be some wild price swings day to day and week to week.
Another interesting year as we start 2020. Hopefully we get some things resolved here in 2019 before we kick off on a new year. Chip, thank you so much for joining us and give us a little perspective on these reports. More Ag Day right after these messages. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen taking a look at our weather map today, and several different things happening, but mostly colder and snowier up north.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, we're really in this just deep freeze right in the north central United States, and today's not going to be any exception, but it does get a little bit warmer over the next few days. We've had this very, very cold air in place. You've got high pressure here in the upper Midwest, but we're going to see some big changes. That's going to move to the east and weaken. Here's a weak system in the Great Lakes. There's not a lot of moisture with the system per se, but we're helping with that lake effect, so we're drawing that moisture from the Great Lakes. We still have rain and some snow exiting much of the east today, and as we put this into motion, you see all of that snow starts to move into the northeast. We also have some wet weather, rain and upper elevation snow into the northwest, but a lot of the south central United States is expected to be on the dry side today. Here's that other system. You've got a quick clipper coming through. That's going to bring some snow to the upper Midwest and then into the Great Lakes as we head into our Thursday forecast. Notice the dry conditions across much of the south. Still rain and higher elevation snow in the northwest. Moving through our Thursday, that that snow moves right on through the Great Lakes. We'll be heading into the Northeast as we get into our Friday. All right, here's a look then at our precipitation estimate. The past 24 hours has really been along that front in the southeastern United States. Now, as we get into the next 24 hours, all that moves to the east, so it's going to be more so the snow in the north central United States and some pretty wet weather out in the west. Again, that rain and some upper elevation snow. Let's talk about that snow. It hasn't amounted to a whole lot in most areas. A lot of it has just been the lake effect snow in the Great Lakes. The next 24 hours, we're just going to increase those lake effect amounts as we have that system enhancing some of that snow, but we really add that snow into the northwest as well. Temperature-wise, yeah, still really cold, but certainly better than yesterday as we get into this afternoon. Single digits for highs, maybe struggling to get into the positive digits there in some of northern Minnesota or so, but still warmer than yesterday. Heading into tonight, we're going to be seeing those low temperatures actually not as cold. Most areas staying above 0. That's a good thing, but still some chilly 30s, even all the way down into almost the deep south there. And then we get into tomorrow afternoon and we see just that gradual increase in temperatures in the nation's midsection. A little cooler, though, in the far northeast. Quick look at that jet stream. You can see that trough that's helping to bring all of that cold air in place. So it starts to warm up in the middle of the week. We've got another trough sinking down for the weekend. So look for some cooler and some stormier weather there, but it just shouldn't be quite as cold as what we have seen this week. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Elma, Washington, rain likely for you today and a high of 51 degrees. Ada, Oklahoma, sunny and warmer with a high of 53. And over to Corry, Pennsylvania, cooler with some snow showers and a high of 25 degrees.
Pork producers are challenging a new California law in court, plus how much profit pork producers could actually see this next year.
AgDay, brought to you by Corvus Corn Herbicide from Bayer. Get an early season win against weeds with Corvus for end of season rewards.
Faro to finish pork producers could see profits double this year compared to last. That's according to the latest pork profit tracker as calculated by Sterling Marketing of Vail, Oregon. Producers saw their margins improve by $11 per head. That puts losses at $30 per head. Now, a year ago, pork producers were losing $20 per head. Now, as an average profit, it's estimated it could be $3 per head this year compared to $1.35 per head last year. Demand from China fueled U.S. pork exports in October. That's according to data released by the USDA and compiled by the U.S. Meat Export Federation. October pork exports increased 8.5% year over year to more than 225,000 metric tons. Export value rose 10% to almost $600 million. The National Pork Producers Council and the American Farm Bureau Federation are challenging California's Proposition 12. MPPC says the rule imposes animal housing standards that reach outside of California's borders to farms across the U.S. and beyond. It says Proposition 12 would force hog farmers who want to sell pork to switch to alternative housing systems at a significant cost to their business. It also says less than 1% of U.S. pork production currently meets Proposition 12's requirements. The legal complaint was filed in U.S. District Court in Southern California. The proposition is scheduled to take effect January 1st of 2022. Coming up, fashion with a sense of sustainability. Why you could soon be wearing clothes made out of sea waste or chestnuts. Next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Would you wear fish skin? How about pineapple leaves, apple peels, or horseradish? Those are just some of the items designers are now using in their fashions. The fashion industry has been coming under fire from people who want to know where and how their clothes are produced. Some are demanding ethical production practices and responsible retailing, especially when it comes to excess levels of stock and what to do with clothes that are no longer wanted. Now, British design duo Vin plus Omni is making changes. They grow a range of crops and plants for textile development, including chestnuts and horseradish in the English countryside. Other designers are choosing to make their garments from wood pulp and sea waste.
We make a leather from chestnuts that's waterproof and durable, and we compress it and we dehydrate it, and it ends up looking like leather, but that's a slow process. We've got to look at plants that we can use en masse. Now, horseradish is a wonderful, wonderful maker of textile, and it's underutilized. Any plants that produce a fiber, a strong, stringy fiber, can be used in that way.
So this is actually made from sea waste, believe it or not. So it's a regenerated nylon. So what they do is they basically get nylon waste that you'd find in the sea, such as fishing nets or industry plastic. And then there's a very clever company that basically can regenerate this into its original purity.
The UN's European Economic Commission estimates the fashion industry is responsible for producing 20% of global wastewater and 10% of global carbon emissions. That's more than the emissions of all international flights and maritime shipping combined. That's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us from all of us here at AgDay. I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great one.